Some of you may know the Garden Song. Written in 1975, familiar to many from John Denver's recording of the song. I know it, having grown up listening to Peter, Paul, and Mary. The refrain of the song goes like this: inch by inch, row by row, I'm gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, someone bless these seeds I sow. Someone warm them from below till the rain comes tumbling down. Inch by inch, row by row. Jesus said, the kingdom of God, as if that's a tongue twister. Jesus said the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground. Inch by inch, row by row. I am not a gardener. I admire and am thankful for those who are, and know that we have many here in our community at Good Sam. My gardening expertise extends about as far as those cups with wet paper towels and a single seed that we all planted and watched sprout back in grade school. But even for those of us who have only gardened in this most elementary of ways, we do share something with the master gardeners among us: waiting. Waiting for the first hint that the seed we have planted has begun to grow, has begun to change, that there is life here. Even the most skilled gardeners, the ones who year after year enjoy the bounty of what they have planted, have to wait and watch. Eventually, in the midst of their tilling and planting and watering, they have to continue doing the other things that need doing: eating, sleeping, taking care of themselves, taking care of others. And then, at some point, they again return to the soil, and there it is, the first shoot of green through the dirt. I suppose in this day and age that a time-lapse camera could capture, and in fact has captured, the exact moment when that growth begins to break through the soil. But even the time-lapse camera has to sit and wait. So the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. Inch by inch, row by row. I'm gonna make this garden grow. As I listened to the garden song again this week, beside these parables of Jesus, that line caught me. I'm gonna make this garden grow. No, Jesus says in this first parable we hear today, no. The garden will sprout and grow, yes, but you will not know how. So for all the type A's and control freaks, and maybe we won't use freaks, those who are passionate perhaps about control, let's all take a deep breath. And actually, if you're human, let's take a deep breath. Because whether you're type A or type Z, it's just human to want to know how. The kingdom of God, the time when God's reign will be full and present, has nothing to do with what we know. In fact, as Jesus' disciples, it actually has everything to do with what we don't know. We might imagine that the someone in the parable who's scattering seed, we might imagine that someone with a blindfold on. We heard in Paul's letter today to the Corinthians that we walk by faith and not by sight. And as disciples, that is how we are called to sow the seeds. By faith, not by sight. We don't know how. Our call as disciples is not to overanalyze or over-strategize how we are scattering and sowing the seeds. Actually, our call as disciples is not to analyze or strategize. We don't have to be over-anxious or even kind of anxious about coming back and checking on the seeds we've planted. How are they doing? Are they bearing fruit? How do they compare to the seeds that others have planted? Not our job. Not our call. In fact, if we want to belabor this imagery a little bit, we will quickly become weeds to the seeds we've planted if we think Jesus is calling us to constant observation, quantification, and comparison. The seed will sprout, and the seed will grow, not because we want it to, or will it to, or because we employ the latest top 5 strategies of seed growth and development. The seed will sprout. The seed will grow. Because God in Jesus Christ, through the power of the Spirit, calls forth new life. It just happens. In a world where God reigns, R-E-I-G-N-S, in a world where God reigns, seeds grow. New life happens, resurrection happens. It just does. And we are not what make the garden grow. So we do not know how, and yet we still have work to do. New life happens, resurrection happens, the garden grows only when there are seeds that have been planted. And that planting is the work of disciples. It is the work of you and of me, and that work is unique for each of us. The places and ways that we scatter and sow the good news are as varied as the number of people gathered in this space today. Our work is to get quiet enough, to get close enough to Jesus that we can begin to listen for how we are called to sow the good news, how we are called to proclaim God's truth with boldness, and to minister God's justice with compassion. And then our work is to do it, to scatter the good news, to be the someone who scatters seeds on the ground and then gets on with everything else that needs doing. Caring for ourselves and for others, rising and sleeping, and in the words of one commentator, getting out of the way. There's actually so much freedom in that. Scatter the good news, proclaim the truth, administer justice, and get out of the way. We are free from the responsibility of what happens next. Claim that freedom. Accept it as a gift. As we scatter the good news in our places of vocation, as we scatter the good news in our homes, even with our own children, we are not responsible for what happens next. Seeds will sprout and seeds will grow on God's time and under God's care. And God might get quite contrary with our incessant asking of, but how, God? How does your garden grow? If we look back to our reading today from 1 Samuel, how will this youngest son of Jesse, this shepherd, this David, become the king who slays a giant and heralds the coming of the Messiah? Scatter the good news and get out of the way. I wonder if you recognize this verse from Isaiah. A shoot, growth, shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The seed will sprout, the seed will grow, and we do not know how. We hear this reading in Advent when we also talk about a Jesse tree, or the family tree of Jesus. Jesus of the family of Jesse from Bethlehem and his shepherd son, David the king. How? How does your garden grow? Scatter the good news and get out of the way. And expect joy in the process. Jesus concludes this parable by sharing that the someone who scattered the seed also enjoys the bounty of the harvest. There is waiting and not knowing in the in-between, but in the end, and that might not be end in the way mortals understand end or within time as we understand time, but in the end, there is a harvest. And it is good, and it is plentiful, and it just happens. Inch by inch, row by row, it is not for us to ask, how does your garden grow? All it takes is the good news in all of us and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, the Spirit moves to bless the seed we sow. And in a moment, the harvest bursts forth from below, and God's kingdom comes raining down.